The third flexible mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol is that of the joint implementation. Under Article 6 of the Protocol, the joint implementation allows a country with an emission reduction commitment to implement an emission reduction project in another developed country. Notice how it is different from the CDM, where such a project could happen in another developing country. Projects under the joint implementation mechanism can earn emission reduction units, each equivalent to 1 ton of carbon dioxide, which is later counted towards meeting its Kyoto target. The joint implementation offers parties a flexible and cost-efficient means of fulfilling a part of their Kyoto commitments, while the host party benefits from foreign investment and technology transfer from the other developed country party. There are also specific rules under the Kyoto Protocol that oblige countries to monitor the actual emissions and maintain precise records of the trades carried out. Registry systems track and record transactions by parties under these market-based mechanisms. The UNFCCC Secretariat, based in Bonn in Germany, keeps an international transaction log to verify what transactions are consistent with the rules of the protocol. Further, parties are required to submit annual emissions inventories and national reports at regular intervals. Article 5 of the protocol commits Annex 1 parties to having in place no later than 2007 national systems for the estimation of greenhouse gas emissions by sources or removals by sinks. Article 7 requires Annex 1 parties to submit annual greenhouse gas inventories as well as national communications at regular intervals, both including supplementary information to demonstrate compliance with the protocol. Article 8 establishes the expert review teams that will review these inventories and national communications submitted by Annex 1 parties. The Kyoto Protocol also has a compliance mechanism, which is designed to strengthen the protocol's environmental integrity, support the carbon market's credibility, and ensure transparency of accounting by parties. The main objective of the compliance mechanism is to facilitate, promote, and enforce compliance with the commitments under the protocol. The Compliance Committee is in turn made up of two branches, a facilitative branch and an enforcement branch. The facilitative branch aims to provide advice and assistance to parties in order to promote better compliance. The enforcement branch, on the other hand, has the responsibility to determine the consequences for parties who do not meet their commitments under the Kyoto Protocol. Since the first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol was scheduled to expire in 2012, parties to the convention decided to launch a process to negotiate a successor to the Kyoto Protocol. At the 13th session of the COP, held in Bali in Indonesia, the international community decided to launch negotiations on the post-2012 international climate regime in order to provide a clear guidance to the parties on how they could increase their efforts to combat climate change at the end of the first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. Since there were several key developments towards a post-Kyoto climate regime during successive meetings of the COP, we will now look at each of these key meetings of the COP over the last several years. COP 13 in Bali. Parties adopted the Bali Roadmap, which includes the Bali Action Plan, that launched a new comprehensive process to enable the full, effective, and sustained implementation of the Convention through long-term cooperative action now up to and beyond 2012, with the aim of reaching an agreed outcome and adopting a decision by the 15th session of the COP in Copenhagen. The Bali Action Plan was divided into 5 main categories, or 5 main focus areas. The first was that of shared vision, the second, mitigation, third, adaptation, fourth, technology, and fifth, finance. This conference also established 2 subsidiary bodies under the Convention to conduct this process. The first was the Ad Hoc Working Group on Long-Term Cooperative Action, AWG-LCA, and the second was the Ad Hoc Working Group on Further Commitments for Annex 1 parties under the Kyoto Protocol, AWG-KP. Both these groups were to complete their work by 2009 and present their outcome at the 15th session of the COP in Copenhagen. COP15, Copenhagen. There were high expectations from this meeting of the COP as it was about to produce a new global climate deal. It attracted 115 world leaders to Copenhagen. However, the end result was the Copenhagen Accord, which was not adopted by the governments formally, but only taken note of. The Copenhagen Accord managed to advance a few key issues in the negotiations. The first was the long-term goal of limiting the maximum global average temperature increase to no more than 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The second, it committed developed countries to provide $30 billion in Fast Start finance for the period 2010 to 2012 and to mobilize long-term finance for further $100 billion a year by 2020 from a variety of sources. And the third was that it extended the work of the two central negotiating groups created at the Bali COP, that is the AWG-LCA and the AWG-KP. COP16, Cancun. The outcome of this conference held in Cancun in Mexico in 2010 was the Cancun Agreements, which are a set of significant decisions made by the international community to address the long-term challenge of climate change. It addressed the issues of mitigation, adaptation, finance, technology, and capacity buildings. One of the most important decisions to emerge from the conference was the establishment of the Green Climate Fund, which was designated as an operating entity of the financial mechanism of the UNFCCC. On technology transfer, there was the decision to establish a technology mechanism, which would consist of the Technology Executive Committee as well as the Climate Technology Center and Network. We will discuss more on these financial and technology mechanisms under the UNFCCC in the module on financial mechanisms and technology transfer. Moving on to COP17 in Durban. Parties continued their work towards a post-2012 legally binding agreement and reached an agreement on the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. Governments recognized the need for a universal legal agreement to deal with climate change beyond 2020. As a result, parties launched the Ad Hoc Working Group on the Durban Platform for Enhanced Action, or the ADP, as a subsidiary body of the convention. One of the work plans of the ADP process is to develop a protocol, another legal instrument, or an agreed outcome with legal force under the convention applicable to all parties by 2015 in order to be adopted at the 21st session of the COP to be held in Paris. COP18, Doha. Parties decided on an amendment to the Kyoto Protocol, which launched the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol from 2013 to 2020, thereby ensuring that the treaty's important legal and accounting models remain in place and underline the principle that developed countries lead mandated action to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Parties also strengthened their resolve and set out a timetable to adopt a universal climate agreement by 2015, which would come into effect in 2020 at the expiry of the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. In addition to these decisions, the work under the Bali Action Plan was wrapped up with the close of the two subsidiary bodies, the AWG-LCA and the AWG-KP. Therefore, the climate negotiations were streamlined to concentrate on the new work towards a 2015 climate agreement under the single negotiating stream of the ADP process. COP19, Warsaw. Parties took some essential decisions to stay on track towards securing a new climate change agreement by 2015. governments agreed to communicate their intended nationally determined contributions towards the Universal Agreement well in advance of the meeting in Paris in December 2015. Parties also took two significant decisions at COP19. The first was the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage, to address losses and damages associated with long-term climate change impacts in developing countries that are especially vulnerable to such impacts. The second was the Warsaw Framework for REDD+, to reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, and bolster forest preservation and sustainable use of forests with direct benefits for people who live in and around forests. COP21, Paris. The international climate negotiations are at a crucial juncture as countries attempt to arrive at a global deal for a post-2020 international climate regime. The international community is keenly awaiting COP21, which is to be held in Paris in December 2015, due to the likelihood of this new climate agreement that could take the form of a protocol, another legal instrument, or an agreed outcome with legal force, and will be applicable to all parties. Until then, it is a wait and watch to see whether there will be a new climate deal or a new climate agreement which addresses the post-2020 climate regime when the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol ends. Summing up, this module provides an introductory understanding of the history of the climate change problem as well as the science underlying the problem of climate change. We then took a closer look at the first international legal instruments to address the issue of climate change, the UNFCCC and the Kyoto Protocol in particular. We then took a look at the implications of international climate negotiations for the development of international climate change law. This module hopes to leave you with a better understanding of the initial international legal response to climate change and the most significant developments in the international climate negotiations which are leading up to the possibility of a renewed climate regime under a new climate agreement in 2015. Thank you.